everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about long-term protective styles versus short-term protective styles and just a few things that you should probably keep in mind when you're looking to choose one or the other. So which one is better, which one do I prefer, which one do I recommend, and what are the facts on both of them? So first I want to start by saying what is a protective style, right? So this is all just my definition and how I understand everything. How I define a protective style for my hair is a style that keeps my ends protected in some way or the other. So not really the whole length of my hair, but my ends in particular. And the reason for that is a lot of the natural hair growth you see is not attributed to what's growing out of your scalp, because that's happening to everyone all the time, but it's actually attributed to the amount of hair that you can keep on your head, basically. And the part of your hair that's most important for keeping hair on your head is the oldest part of your hair, which are the ends that can be a lot more delicate than the length of your hair. I hope this is making sense. So yeah, I define a protective style as one that keeps the ends of my hair protected from things like breakage, from the elements, from catching on clothes, etc., etc. So this right now would not be a protective style. Something that I'll insert here will be a protective style. And you'll see quite a few examples of what I've done throughout my years. Let's talk about long-term versus short-term. Which one is better? Which ones do I prefer? Which one do I recommend, right? So this is a hard question because there have been many people who have grown their hair like myself through primarily the short-term protective styles. And there have been a lot of people who have grown their hair through primarily the long-term protective styles. So I think it's just a matter of choosing which one works for you best and going with that one. And things to take into account could be your hair type, your lifestyle, how much patience you have with your hair, how good you are with taking care of your hair in terms of technique, and how gentle you are when you're detangling your hair and how much your hair actually tangles. Let's talk about long term first. The pros would be, obviously you can put your hair away for a longer period of time. You don't have to touch your hair as often. Your hair has the opportunity to show quite a lot of growth before you take it out. So you might have about half an inch, or you might have an inch, things like that, before you take your hair out and look at it again, right? Usually it looks like maybe wigs more nowadays, weaves, braids as well, that people keep in for 3 weeks plus, I would say is long term. I know some people keep these styles in for up to 6 months, which I personally would not recommend, just because I think your hair deserves more care than that, really. But I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but for me, I think that's too long. I don't think your hair, especially kept in a particular style, I don't think there's enough movement in that style for you to properly cleanse it or to properly moisturize it either. And so I'm categorizing that as more of a long-term style. In terms of things to keep mind of, however, and these are really, really important, when your hair is in a long-term protective style, in my experience, my hair has been a lot more fragile when I'm removing that protective style. So because it's going such a long period of time without being remoisturized, and I have low porosity hair, so remoisturize for me means dunked in water, basically, because you can't just do a little spray. My hair it just hits and falls off like that. So it needs to really be immersed in water to really be remoisturize, which is why I wash my hair so often. If you have hair like mine, you might find that long-term protective styles make your hair really dry. When you're going through that process of taking it down, cleansing it and remoisturizing it, you might find that you see quite a bit of breakage, or that your hair just doesn't feel right. It's a bit straw-like, and that was my experience. So you have to keep in mind that this may happen. Another thing to keep in mind is the fact that your hair is very, very prone to breakage when it's up for such a long period of time. What I mean by that is your hair is likely to get a lot of breakage on the takedown because it's in a really fragile state after being up for such a long period of time. So if you're someone who still hasn't mastered gentle detangling techniques, I mean, if you're using a comb and you're dragging through your hair like this, still, if you're at that stage, then the long-term protective styles definitely can do more harm than good. So you have to be really mindful on taking your hair down very, very, very gently. And I mean like it's a wet piece of tissue, of kitchen towel, basically. Like separating it like this. If any knots become too much to handle, just making them as small as possible before cutting them out, and just being overall really, really gentle with your hair because it's in such a fragile state and it's completely depleted at that point. So those are some things to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that when it's in a protective style, you might not want to go for the heavier and less frequent moisturizing. So for example, with me, I will wash my hair, deep condition it, and then I'll use a leave-in and a hair butter, and that will keep my hair moisturized for up to 2 weeks, right? But in a protective style that's lasting 3 to 6 weeks and onwards, if you seal heavily to begin with, and you're in a state where you don't necessarily take it down, right? Because you're keeping it up, that's why it's protective. Let's say it's some cornrows under a wig. You won't be able to seal it heavily again, right? But equally so, you might not be able to cleanse it well enough to get all of the buildup from the last moisturization out of your hair. I hope that makes sense. So I would recommend, if your hair is in much longer term styles, then to think of moisturizing it with some kind of spritz. Now, I would say something like water with conditioner and oils all in one spray bottle and just spritz in your hair as much as you can. I would say that on a daily basis, maybe even twice a day, might be a bit more effective than trying to do one heavy seal and making it last the whole time your hair is in that protective style, 3 weeks plus, or trying to heavy seal it more than once because you don't get a chance to wash it out anyway. So in my journey, the long-term style that I used the most was braids. So you know that there was a point in my my hair journey where it was braids all the time, back to back to back to back. And what I found was that it thinned my hair, unfortunately. It thinned my hair. So I'm not bashing long-term protective styles at all, but it didn't work for me. So it would be just disingenuous for me to come up here and say that it works. But for other people, I know it works really well. So they keep their hair in braids for a couple of months. They do a very, very gentle takedown, and then they cleanse it, moisturize it, and then they repeat, right? And a lot of people have used that to grow their hair from really short, all the way to waist length, hip length, tailbone length. Unfortunately, it didn't work that way for me. What I got was hair breakage. So anything that causes any tension on my hair likes to break my hair. Even now when I do buns, I get like all sorts of flyaways here. I've got a whole bunch of flyaways around the middle of my head where my hair is usually in a bun, and so it pulls and it breaks very easily, right? So those are some tips for your long-term protective style. Short-term protective styling is a little bit different. So I'm classifying that as anything up to 2 weeks. And I think for me, it usually looks like a bun, but for others, it could be a bun, cornrows, braids, twists, anything like that. I would say my tips with this would be a bit of a heavier seal. So like I'm doing now, something like a liquid leave-in, and then a butter that includes some oils, or a liquid oil, then a cream, or a liquid oil, then a butter, like LOC method, or however you want to call it. I think that is more effective in the short-term protective styles, because you don't have to touch your hair too often. You can keep it the way it is in a bun or whatever for the next 2 weeks or so. And then when you take it down, unlike the long-term protective style, your hair isn't too depleted. It's still even at some points. When I take my bun down, if I've kept it in for 2 weeks and I've left it at that, when I take my bun down, my hair is actually still really moisturized. So I'm not even at the point when I have dry hair yet, which is great. Another pro of the short-term protective styles is that you can cleanse your hair often, right? So when you are using the heavier products, then you can wash your hair, you can shampoo every 7 days or every 14 days, and you can get those heavy products off, and then you can start again as a fresh. That is my advice for more of the short-term protective styles. For which one I prefer, I've tried both along my journey. I've worn wigs, I've worn braids, and I've done buns and braids, what I do now for the short term. And for me in my hair journey, short term wins by far. Like, I know not everybody's like this. A lot of ladies, especially on YouTube, a lot of them, like, their hair works really well with the long term, right? And they're super good at taking it down very, very, very gently, maintaining it and retaining that length. But for me, I couldn't find a way to make it work for my hair. When it came to the wigs, my scalp got really itchy really quickly. Even if I washed my hair in the braids or in the combers, I didn't quite get to the scalp the way I'd like to if my hair was loose the way it is now, and things like this always blocked me. And then when I was wearing braids, you'll know if you saw my natural hair journey video, but my hair got a lot thinner because I guess the weight of the braids were too much. And even though I was spritzing it every day, again, because I had artificial hair along with my own hair, the moisture just wasn't getting to it the way it should. So I was having issues there as well. And then my scalp was just on fire. So for me, short-term wins. And I combine techniques from long-term protective styles and short-term. So I'll use a short-term style, I'll heavy seal, and when I take it down, I'll be super gentle as if my hair is really fragile, even though it's been moisturized for ages. Then I will cleanse and condition, and I'll usually put it back up. So these are just some tips that I've learned from my natural hair journey. I hope that this helps. If you have any questions, please leave them below. As always, the link to my hair butters and my scrunchies are in the description below if you'd like to purchase. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.